All right, everybody. So we are so excited to have you guys back on our podcast because we're talking about something that really sits dear to our hearts, which is wealth. So throughout the podcast, we'll be talking about the difference between rich and wealthy and the two types of rich people and really just digging deep into our thoughts on it. So to start off, I like to say that millionaires are cheap and the wealthy aren't.
Yeah. And the reason why we say that is because there's about 7.6 million, if not a little bit more, households in America today that have a net worth of $1 million or more. And that's still a small number because there's over 100 million households in America, but it's still more than what most people would think. And the reason why is because we actually have met people who may have $1 million in assets, and you would never actually know. And having $1 million in assets doesn't necessarily make you a wealthy individual.
And also having $1 million in your savings account also doesn't make you a wealthy individual either.
Yeah, because if you there's a video by Grant Cardone where he talks about what $1 million that can actually do for you. So if your yearly expenses are $50,000 and it's sitting in a bank account, maybe possibly if you're lucky earning you 2% interest, well, inflation is 3%. So that 2% that you get from the bank is pretty much canceled out. So you're not really earning any money if it's sitting in a bank account. You're not earning cash flow. So if your expenses are $50,000 a year, then that $1 million is going to be gone in 20 years. So that means if you have, let's say you have a kid 9 months from now, before they're even done with college, you will be broke again if you don't add to that $1 million, if you don't invest that $1 million. And if I know people who their yearly expenses are close to 6 figures, if that's the case, now you're shrinking that 20 years down to more like 15 or 10 years. Money doesn't last long at all if it's just sitting somewhere.
Right. And then so if you win $1 million in the lottery, don't quit your job and expect that that's gonna last a long time, because it's not.
Yeah, I met people who get a lump sum of money and then they spend it and then they're all sad when they spend it, and it's like, how did you expect it to last unless you invested it in an asset that throws off cash flow or revenue? It's not how that works.
And just the kind of tad point on that, I was just reading The Power of Broke by Damon John, and a lot of people that he interviewed in the book, they said that if they didn't struggle at the beginning, then they probably would have spent the money on stuff that they didn't really need, and then they wouldn't be where they're at today.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to be rich, and then what does it mean to be wealthy? So what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, so kind of like I was explaining before, if you get $1 million lump sum, just sitting somewhere, you're, regardless of where that $1 million is, if it's in your house, if it's in your under your mattress, buried in your backyard somewhere, in a shed, in your kid's crib, wherever it is, you're rich by most people's standards. So rich is basically having a lot of money. But Robert Kiyosaki actually gave a definition to what wealth actually meant to him. And to him, wealth was actually measured in time. And what he meant by that is that it's not about how much money you have, it's about how long that money lasts you. So if let's use the $1 million concept. If you have $1 million and your expenses are $100,000 a year, your wealth is measured in 10 years. If your expenses are half that, your wealth is measured in 20 years. But when you're an investor, an entrepreneur, and you invest that $1 million into an illiquid asset that throws off revenue, that throws off cash flow, that throws off earnings, these types of things, and it does it without you necessarily having to be present within that business or that asset, then you are technically wealthy because you now have enough cash flow to cover your yearly or monthly expenses without necessarily having to go to work or punch a clock. So that's what it really means to be wealthy. And I've met people who don't necessarily have this large sum of money, but because they invested correctly and they have businesses or real estate, they are technically wealthy because they don't have to do anything to work ever again. Like if you're retired on a pension, you got the golden ticket because you are technically wealthy. You don't have to do anything in order to eat. You don't have to do anything in order to pay your mortgage and put food on the table. However, if that money doesn't generate an ongoing income for you, regardless of what's going on in your life, then you're just at some degree just rich or richer for the most part. And that's really what it really means to me. So what are some of your thoughts on it?
A lot of the same ideas, but to dig a little bit deeper into that, I think that mindset has a lot to do with it as well. Because when you're rich, it's kind of like when you're rich, you only have money. But when you're wealthy, you not only have money, but you have time, and then you also have health, which, ultimately goes back to time. Mm-hmm. So rich people, they don't really have time. They more so just have the money. And then when, I've seen people and like when they have a lot of money and they brag about it, it's like, yeah, you got money, but you just like twisted your back last week playing golf. So it's like you're not wealthy in all aspects, and I can't really call you wealthy until you are.
Yeah. And it's like, I truly agree with what you're saying because I believe wealth is more so holistic. Like, what's the point of having $1 million if, like, you have no one to share with? So you're lonely, you don't have any friends, you don't know how to have fun, you don't know how to enjoy yourself. Like, if you can't take care of yourself properly, then literally the money that you have doesn't necessarily mean too much. And I think I mentioned in a video before that a lot of my mentors actually believe that there's upwards of 4 currencies. You have money, time, knowledge, and resources. And people who are truly wealthy, they have all of those currencies.
All of them, yeah.
They have all of those currencies. But I've seen people who make $250,000 or $500,000 a year, and they're tired. Their relationships are suffering, and then what's the point of the money if you can't enjoy the fruit of the other 3 currencies? So I really like the idea of it's a mindset. And another thing that I've noticed about wealthy individuals is that they do not have a strong sense of competition. And what I mean by that, like, don't get me wrong, like I have friends that are millionaires and they're like, they like healthy competition. Like, I want to beat you, but we still gonna be cool after this.
It's more so like they're like collaboration over competition rather than I'm competing with everybody, and I'm thinking in a scarcity mindset because I want to get it before you get everything.
Yeah, like I've literally spoke to people before, and I was like just spilling the beans. I'll tell you everything that I do in my business and pretty much how I do it, and like the other person, I'll be like, oh, well, how you do that? And they'll be like, man, it's a secret. I can't tell everybody or whatever. And it's like, dude, you acting like this is the best thing since sliced bread. There's somebody who has way more money than you that's been doing it. And it's like, I'm more so focused on trying to elevate each other as opposed to me just elevating somebody else or somebody just elevating me. Because even the people who are wealthier than me, like, I still do whatever I can to help them become better because I know they're going to help me become better because they're wealthy mindset. They aren't just millionaires who has $1 million and they're just holding on to it. They're more so
they have wealthy relationships as well.
Yeah, they have wealthy relationships. And plus, wealthy people spend a lot of money, but they they make it purposeful. So they're not just scrimping and trying to save every penny. Like one of my mentors actually says, and he's your mentor too, he says, don't be a penny wise and a dollar fool.
So going into that, let's break it down. So what are the two types of, I don't want to call them rich people, but what are the two types of people that basically make money?
Yeah.
So the first type.
Oh yeah, so kind of I got ahead of myself again. But the first type is people who like just scrimp and save. It's kind of like I hate to say
millionaire
it.
next door.
Yeah, the millionaire next door, and not only that, but the Dave Ramseys, the Susie Ormans, and all of those people. And I'm not saying that those people are bad. What my opinion is, you listen to those people when you don't have control over your spending. So let's say like you have a decent paying job that pays you $250,000 a year, but every year you're trying to figure out where all your money is going and you're not saving any of it. You should listen to those people because you have a habit that is not healthy towards generating wealth, really. You know what I mean?
But then there's not really like a real goal there. They're kind of just doing it because they want to be a millionaire.
Right. And, and wealth always has a goal behind it. So I always say that a business is a place that facilitates the exchange of value. So David Meltzer, he says it perfectly. So he feels like every day he wakes up, he has a bag of $100 bills, so something of value, and his job is to exchange as many of those $100 bills for 20s. And by the end of the day, he wants an empty bag of $100 bill. Well, he wants to have given away all his $100 bills in exchange for 20. So basically, as a wealthy individual, your goal needs to be that I'm a provide so much value to people that they're gonna want to give money to me for whatever my service is. So like, if you're paying for cable right now, I know I hear a lot of people complain about, oh
Comcast.
They're overpriced. This cable isn't worth it. Blah blah
It's
blah.
a monopoly.
At the end of the day, if the service is still on, that means that you are willing to pay that money, and you're willing to pay that money because as much as you complain about it, at the end of the day, it still provides more value to you than the however much money, the $100 or $200 or $300 a month that you paid them in exchange for this service. So wealthy individuals understand that. So they know that whatever they get, they have to dish it back out. There's the other type of rich person where they get something and they don't want to exchange it for anything. They want to hold on to it because a lot of rich individuals and not wealthy individuals, if you ask wealthy individuals, they actually truly believe that money doesn't have a value until it is used. If you ask rich people or people who desire to be rich, they actually think that money has a value. They think it's worth something. They think that, they think if they stash enough of it up somewhere that they're going to be in a better situation. And that's not necessarily the case. So right. What is some of your thoughts about it?
So yeah, I really like that idea just because, like, if you get $10, then it's like, okay, that's $10, but it doesn't do anything. It's a piece of paper as opposed to what you spend it on. So if you're spending it at the movies or on a snack or something, then it's like, okay, then that, that provided me value.
Right.
So now it means something because it got me something.
Yeah.
Not because of what it is.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if everybody just collectively said, okay, the US dollar isn't worth anything, which I'm not going to get into that, but may or may not be the case. The US dollar isn't worth anything. You can't buy anything with it. Does anybody care how much of those green rectangular pieces of paper that you have in your wallet, your pocket, or in the bank somewhere? At that point, it doesn't even matter because you don't have access to the things that it can bring you. Like me personally, I feel like money is something that that gets you access to the things that you want. the money that I have got me access to my phone. It got me access to my computer. It gets me access to the food that I eat in the place that I stay and the things that I want. It's going to give me access to the vacations that I want to go on. All it does is buy access. And the second that you're don't think of it in those terms is you're placing value onto something that doesn't necessarily have value but has the ability to get you things that actually brings you value.
So going off of that, I really like how when we were talking earlier, you said that the wealthy spend purposefully. So they repurpose everything. And when we were just talking about, like money and the value it gives you, I mean that goes directly into spending purposefully. And by that we mean it's kind of like investing, but not just investing in like stocks or real estate. It can be investing in yourself, which is probably one of the greatest, not probably, that is the greatest investment that I think anybody can have.
Yeah, and Warren Buffett actually says the same exact thing. The best investment you can make is an investment in yourself. Because I think we can all agree that Berkshire Hathaway wouldn't be anything if Warren Buffett didn't know anything about valuating businesses.
Right. If he
not
didn't
stocks.
Right.
Businesses. Because some people get it confused. Evaluating businesses. Warren Buffett actually says he does not care about the stock price.
Yeah, and doesn't he read like 8 hours a day or something?
Reads like 8 hours a day.
So if he didn't invest in himself by reading for 8 hours a day, then he would not be as successful and as known as he is today.
Yeah. So, and the thing about it is, me and Jasmine were just talking about how most people think of an investment. If you're an investor, anything could be an investment. If you're just a regular middle class person who has the same middle class education on finance, you'll think that you need a stockbroker, and that stockbroker is going to rightfully advise you on what stocks to buy. Not saying that they won't or that they can't. I'm pretty sure there's excellent stockbrokers out there, but you feel like you would need that person. And they will tell you, oh, buy this stock, buy this bond, buy this mutual fund, and that's just not the case. And we realized this totally when we went to the 10X Growth Con. I know we always talk about it, but that's because it's like, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to be there. Like, if you weren't there, I get it. Tickets can be a little bit pricey sometimes. I totally get it. I wasn't in the situation where that was comfortable spending that. However, it paid off.
We had to invest in ourselves.
Yes.
The investment we made by going down to Miami and being in the crappy Airbnb that we were in, it provided so much more value. Like, we can't even tell you guys. Like, it brought this podcast to you all that you're listening to right now. It brought our name change. It brought tons of ideas and inspiration and imagination, and we really wouldn't have gotten as far within like these last couple of weeks as we did if we didn't go to the 10X Growth Con. And I also really want to mention the specific things that he was talking about at GrowthCon, about how he spends purposefully. So a lot of you may know that Grant Cardone has a Rolls Royce.
Yep.
Well,
nice, by the way.
That's a marketing move. Like, he uses that Rolls Royce to market his product, and people look at him like, wow, that's a real nice car. And then they're like, oh, that's his company. And then he has a jet. So guess what? He can get people to come speak at his conference or come to a meeting because he'll fly them out.
Right.
So it's like, it's not a typical like, oh, this is a 20% return on your money. No, it's like an infinite return, and you don't know when you're gonna get it all the time, but it will happen. It's kind of like faith, like walking by faith. When you believe something, it'll come to you.
Yeah.
When you do good, it comes back to you all the time.
Yeah. So what I feel like what rich people would do, and I think this is a great way to draw a parallel. I think rich people would actually work double hours to save up for the Rolls Royce, and they'll put it in their personal name,
Yes.
and it'll be basically a liability that they have to pay for. What Grant Cardone did, which is what any wealthy individual would do, is the guy basically created systems, trained people, and really built a business. And then he built it up to the point where it's like, dang, like I've invested as much as I could invest, and now it's tax time, and I'm gonna have to pay the IRS a ton of money, and I need a couple million. I don't remember how much the Rolls Royce was, but at least a few $100,000 in write-offs that I can use instead of paying, the IRS. And some of you may be upset about that. I don't care, but I mean, some people rather, buy other things than paying the IRS. That's all I'm saying. So he knew that he was going to have a huge tax liability. So what does in his business? So he buys the Rolls Royce and then decks it out in a 10x paint job, and uses that Rolls Royce in regards to marketing and getting his business name out there. So kind of like she said, you can't necessarily quantify the return on investment all the time, but you got to think that Rolls Royce catches people's attention. And what happens when you get somebody's attention? I mean, he's a real estate guy, so you may want to invest with them. Or you get the attention of a business owner, and the business owner may want to buy one of your courses. So it's what I think is that rich people and wealthy people could buy the same things, but wealthy people would give it a purpose that brings in more income, whereas a rich person just wants to enjoy the thing without it necessarily becoming an asset for them. That is the first time where I thought about it, and I was like, man, this Rolls Royce is probably an asset, which is crazy. So
you just tied that together beautifully. I like that.
Oh, thank you.
So, since we were talking about Grant Cardone and the 10X conference and everything, I want to leave off this podcast with just one last thought. And, so basically, you shouldn't want to be rich. You should not want to be a millionaire by the standards of like, oh, I have $1 million. You should strive to 10x that goal. So instead of saying, oh, I want to make $1 million, you need to say, I want to make $10 million. I want to be a multi-millionaire. I don't want to just be a millionaire. Yeah. Like our goal, we want to be a billionaire, not a multi-millionaire. So, strive for like far ahead. That's the ultimate faith. And I feel like when you do only strive for what you think is possible, like what you can save for, like, oh, you can save $1 million, and that's really just a self-limiting belief.
Yeah, because a lot of people they want it liquid, they want it cash, they want and it's like I said, money doesn't have a value until it is spent. So people who are wealthy, like Warren Buffett, like Ray Dalio, like Grant Cardone, like Gary Vee, like all of these other people, it's like they'll get it and they're like, oh man, I gotta get rid of it. What can I buy that I could use to get people's attention, to get people's time, to get people's money, whatever it may be, so that I can exchange value for value, right? And that's why I think it should be your goal to not necessarily save $1 million, but how about make that in a year? Have that be a reoccurring revenue. Because if it's not a reoccurring revenue, guess what? It's not going to be a legacy. Like if you read The Millionaire Next Door, and I know we reference this book a lot, but it's definitely opens your eyes about what $1 million actually is. If you read The Millionaire Next Door, every time one of those millionaires, almost every time one of those millionaires passed away and left their children a net worth of $1 million or two or three or four, like literally within 3 to 5 years, that $1 million would be gone. And it's because people don't realize that if I don't invest this capital and get my money making me more money, it's gonna be gone one day. And for some people, like I don't know if you heard about the Vanderbilts, but it may took a generation or two for them to lose their wealth. But you're guaranteed to lose it if it's not invested properly. So we just want to stress that. Don't just have $1 million liquid, have $1 million in revenue, or 10 or 50 or whatever your number is, because it's more than enough out there. They print it. That's why it loses value. So it's like, why not want as much as you can get? Because it's paper.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that pretty much, ends our discussion for today. We really appreciate you all taking the time to listen, all the way to the end. And we promise that our content is just going to get better and better over time, because we know we are.
Yep.
And so the question we are leaving you off with is, what would you do if you inherited $1 million?
Yep.
So just sit on that question and think about it. If you like, put it in the comments.
Hey, if you're going to buy the Royce, be smart about it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not saying you can't buy it. Just be smart.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for listening or watching or whatever you're doing right now. And, we'll see you next time.
Later.